What I'm going to first do is ask if there's actually, Mr. Brown, I guess you need to read the second ordinance into the record.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. An ordinance of the City Commission of the City of Winter Park, Florida, amending Section 62-77 of the Municipal Code and adding new Section 62-79 to promote public peace and order in residential areas and to promote the important value of tranquil and harmonious neighborhoods in the City of Winter Park by regulating within a defined buffer area all picketing regardless of the content of the communication and allowing a resident to post a no loitering sign on his or her property when a protest or picketing activity is occurring on a sidewalk, right-of-way, street, or other public area abutting the subject private property or within the defined buffer, providing for alternative areas for protest and picketing, providing for enforcement, providing savings clause and severability, providing for conflicts and an effective date.
Thank you. Will the commission on this matter?
Move for approval.
Okay, Commissioner Mackin has moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Spring. Commission discussion. Hearing none, I'll open the floor for public comment. Citizens, the only thing I would ask as we make public comment is just consider what others have said before you, and if there's new light, we'd love to hear it, and if not, if you want to say ditto, that's fine too. But there are numerous ways, obviously, to make comment without repeating things that they made before. So, lining up is great. That lets us get home before midnight. So.
Good evening. My name is Brian Denham, 50266 Springs Boulevard. I spoke at the last commission meeting. At the last commission meeting, all commissioners of the approving vote cited the freedom from fear as a reason to pass this ordinance. Do you realize what agenda you're supporting though? On January 6, 1941, FDR gave us 4 freedoms speech: freedoms of speech and religion, and freedom from want and fear. The results of his effort did not serve the cause of freedom in the United States. Within several months of the speech, Roosevelt stopped all oil shipments to Japan, which helped lead to the bombing of Pearl Harbor. All the while Roosevelt preached a distorted view of freedom, he was maneuvering us into war. Eleanor Roosevelt saw to it that his concept of the 4 freedoms was incorporated in the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights. In its preamble, that document states, "Freedom from fear and want has been proclaimed the highest aspiration of the common people." This is the cause you're unwittingly supporting, empowering world government by the slow, coordinated erosion of our constitutional rights. Any effort to mandate or enforce the goal of making everyone free from fear through government action will guarantee the destruction of the concept of personal liberty. Whether it's local government or world government, and no matter the motivation, this effort can only destroy one's right to life, liberty, and property. But we have been living with this effort made popular by FDR for 70 years, and results should be self-evident. Our country and the world are more fearful than ever. Roosevelt no doubt would claim his 4 freedoms were based on moral imperative, such as those people who are here tonight saying that we need to prevent free speech. Yet everything he believed in and promoted was based on an immoral principle of government force. Think in your mind, Japanese internment and the presidential term limits that resulted after he had passed away, because the people at that time realized that they were setting a bad precedent of tyranny. The idea of freedom from fear as a mandate government, the idea of freedom from fear as a mandate government opens up the Pandora's box. Fear is a nebulous term that can be subjectively defined and artificially created. Under these conditions, government is expected to provide for any need or desire. And since government never produces anything, its only option is to steal from a group and pass what is stolen on to the next. You give this supposed freedom from fear to a few individuals in this community means you must steal a portion of the First Amendment rights from everyone in your community. Many believe that politics is the art of compromise. Certain political goals may be served in this manner, but compromising the basic moral principles serves the pragmatist utilitarian belief that government planning is superior to individual decision making. Those who claim that a little compromise is crucial to silence demands of the authoritarians and the powerful few who end up controlling the government are always willing to give up some fraction of their liberties and property in the hope that the demand for more benefits or privilege will be satiated. But it never happens. The more they get, the more they demand. Benjamin Franklin is quoted, "They who give up essential liberty to obtain a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety."
One more line, please.
I'm sorry?
One more line.
Thank you. It is such an irony that so many expect the government can protect us from fear. Basically, it's constantly manufactured fear to guide us, to control what we want to do, to lead us into wars.
Thank you.
But this is how fear works.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Again, given my previous comments, I would appreciate no applause or or outbursts of any kind. Thank you.
But before I begin, Matt, could I just pass out to each commissioner a copy of the Supreme Court case? I'll just introduce myself while I'm doing that.
If you'd identify yourself, please.
Yes, I'm sorry.
You can pass that to the clerk.
I'm David Slaughter, okay. I'm David Slaughter, I'm a professor at the University of
And Mr. Slaughter, I know the mic isn't especially situated for you, but if you could move that up for you.
Pardon me, okay.
For your voice, that would be, yeah, I
Okay.
think others will be able to hear you.
Great, that's great. I think there's 5 cases here, so you can have them, and then whenever you want me, just so I can introduce myself, I'm a professor at the University of Central Florida. I've been teaching there since 1978, and I've covered the case that I'm giving to you. I'm sure it's something that the city attorney is well aware of, and that probably many of you are well aware of. But initially, I'd like to point out that this ordinance is, without question, it's constitutional to protect the privacy rights of every individual in their own home. None of our rights are absolute. They were never intended to be absolute. If you read any of what the Founding Fathers said, the First Amendment's not absolute, neither is the Second Amendment, and on and on. But I think probably the thing that I might be of most help to the Commission is with regard to the constitutionality of such an ordinance. Again, it has to be artfully drawn, but this case involves the town of Brookfield, Wisconsin, which dealt with precisely the same issue. On page 3 is the ordinance. The way it was worded, it could be construed either narrowly or broadly, but it was interpreted by the Supreme Court to ban only focus picketing in front of one individual's residence. And the court talked about the need for the ordinance, or the reason for the ordinance, is protection and preservation of the home, so that members of the community enjoy in their homes and dwellings a feeling of well-being, tranquility, and privacy. Now, on I guess the 5th page, the court points out, again, I have it all highlighted here, even protected speech is not equally permissible in all places and at all times. You can have reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions, and that's probably the single most important paragraph. I think it's probably page 6, but it's an indented paragraph. And the court said for the state to enforce regulations concerning time, place, and manner, you have to meet 3 tests, and they're pretty simple. 1, you need a significant governmental interest. Number 2, you have to narrowly tailor your statute. In other words, it can't be any broader than necessary to accomplish the legitimate interest. And 3, you have to leave open alternative channels of communication. That's precisely what an ordinance that bans just focus picketing in front of one individual's residence does. You can't, if you were to ban all residential picketing, then you've gone too far. The court talks about what a ban on just focus picketing in front of one individual's residence would still permit. It points out protesters have not been barred from residential neighborhoods. They can still enter the neighborhoods. They can march, they can go door to door, distribute literature. You just can't camp out in front of one person's house and stay there. Every person ought to have that right, and the court points out on the following page, the home is different. You can walk away from unwanted speech when you're out in the public. You can't do that when you're in your own home. No one should be subjected to objectionable speech in the privacy of their own home. Whether you're Mrs. Sandusky or whether you're, it has nothing to do with the substance of the issue. It's not about abortion, it's not about for or against anything. It's about having the right to be in your own home and not have unwanted speech forced down your throat.
Thank you, sir.
Again, the rest of the decision, I think, is pretty self-explanatory.
Appreciate this, too. Thank you.
Thank
Sir,
you.
do you have any other comments?
I'm sorry?
Do you have any other
Yeah,
comments?
I thought I gave it to you. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Do that one very first.
That's okay.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
My bad.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Allura Lightfoot. I live at 4400 Shumard Court in Orlando, and I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I oppose this ordinance. I was at the awareness campaign that began this whole process in front of Ms. Tasha's home. This was a peaceful protest on a public sidewalk, and we were exercising our First Amendment rights. We were singing, praying, and holding signs with pictures that exposed the tragic reality of what happens to little babies at the place of business where Ms. Tosh is the CEO, Planned Parenthood. The police who were called said that they had been told that we were using profanity, that we were yelling, and that we were stopping the cars on Aloma Avenue. However, they stated that they had been called under false pretenses because we were not doing any of that. Again, we were just exercising our right to free speech. There are already laws that protect people from threats and violence. We don't need another law. Ronald Reagan said, "Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction." We didn't pass it to our children in the bloodstream. It must be fought for, protected, and handed on for them to do the same. Or one day we will spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it was once like in the United States when men were free. Thank you so much.
Again, please.
Good evening. Mayor and Commissioners, I'm here today in strong support of Ordinance 6279.
Please identify yourself.
I'm the Reverend Karen Barker Duncan from First Congregational Church here in Winter Park.
Thank you.
Again, I am here in strong support of this ordinance 6279. I've lived in Winter Park for 11 years and have served the congregation at First Congregational Church of Winter Park as Associate Minister since 2001. Like all of you, I place a strong value on the quality of life here in Winter Park. As a community, we've worked to preserve our city's beauty, safety, and tranquility. Our Winter Park neighborhoods are cherished, sacred spaces where children learn to ride bicycles, neighbors chat over coffee, and where families rest and relax on weekends. They are not public forums for protest activity, and they should certainly never be spaces where residents feel bullied, harassed, or intimidated. Each of us has the right to feel safe and secure in our own homes and to maintain harmony and tranquility in our neighborhoods. I urge you to use your votes tonight to approve this ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Lee.
This brings back, my name is Phil Anderson. I live at 2020
In
Fawcett.
the purvey of the chair, it is certainly to see you calling you down to serve our city.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'm just here to say that if there's any doubt that Winter Park doesn't value free speech, they should come to a city commission meeting and experience it firsthand.
I feel it by the hour, right?
That's right, that's right. So first of all, let me assure you that I think everyone on the commission truly values free speech. They're absolutely committed to it, and there's nothing that they would do that would alter that. I think equally important, though, is the requirement to protect the right for people to peacefully enjoy their own home. And I think that's what's before you today, and I would absolutely ask you to, I don't get to vote, I would absolutely ask you to vote for that ordinance. I think you've heard from others that there are certainly ordinances like this across the country. People have faced this issue before, and those issues have been sustained. And so I applaud you on your courage to tackle this issue. And that's really about it. I think you're going to hear a lot more this evening, but I just want to thank you very much for your thoughtful considerations here and for supporting the ordinance.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Myra Holtzman. I live at 1821 Ansel Avenue. I'm a little nervous, so I've never done this before. But my family and I moved here a year ago from San Diego, and we had lived in, I don't know if any of you guys have ever been to Boulder, Colorado, but Winter Park is like the Boulder of Florida. And what I love about it is exactly what you guys have been talking about during this meeting. And when we came here for a house hunting trip, this was our first choice. And when I heard about the family that was harassed at their home, the first thing that came up for me was my mother bear instinct, because I have a daughter that's 3.5 years old, and I was cringing at the idea of having a home that was targeted, peaceful or not, that was, you know, targeting a family. And that's really where I come from today in speaking to you. Excuse me, I'm still nervous. Whew, sorry. Thank you. My daughter plays in our front yard, and she rides her bike, and we take walks all through the neighborhood. And I would hate for, I could deal with it, my husband can deal with it, but I would hate for my daughter to experience any kind of intensity, negativity, anything that in her in her very young life could, have her question the safety of her world. And again, that's really where I'm coming from. I don't know about the constitutionality of the law. I don't know about a lot of, some things that people have said, but I know that I will fiercely protect my daughter from anything that would put her in harm's way. So I am in support of this ordinance, and I really hope that you guys will vote for that too. So, thank you.
Thank you. And I like to think that we're the La Jolla of San Diego. So. Appreciate your analogy. We don't have mountains. Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Dr. R.C. Sproul Jr., and I serve as a pastor. My desire for everyone that I meet is that they should have the same experience that I've had in meeting the Lord Jesus Christ. If you are familiar with the Christian faith, you know that as Christians, we believe that we're called to turn from our sins, to embrace the work of Christ.
And Pastor, I don't want to take you afield, but I trust you'll land it.
Sir,
on the
I will.
ordinance or not the
Before my
ordinance.
time is up, rest assured.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Thank you. As such, it is my duty before God to proclaim the good news of Jesus Christ. Now, I sat here in this room this evening and watched you deliberate, and I've listened to you struggle to define what we mean by square footage, or what we mean by a vision plan, or I can't remember the words you were using. And yet now we have legislation before us, or something like legislation, that's going to ask police officers to define what is a protest, what is a picket. When I'm in public property and I'm asking someone to turn from their sins and embrace the Lord Jesus Christ, which is what I do, often outside the doors of the Orlando Women's Center. Now the question is, again, can I be shuttled off and moved somewhere else where I'm not allowed to speak? Now, I'm very sensitive to the home issue. I appreciate the sanctity of the home. I want my home to be sanctified. And I appreciate also the issue of children. I'm the father of 8 children, 2 of whom would be dead today if it weren't for people publicly speaking against abortion, because they were in the wombs of mothers who were abortion-minded. And people spoke to them and changed their mind, and now they're my sons. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't think you can distinguish between my First Amendment right to proclaim the Lordship of Christ and what you call picketing, what you call protesting. I think you can distinguish between a picket or a protest and harassment. I think you have noise ordinances. I think people should be safe and secure in their homes. But I also think that people who are proud of what they do should not be ashamed when someone shows up to tell their neighbors what they do. Thank you.
I'm Dr. Patricia McEwen from Doctors for Life International, and I live in Palm Bay, Florida, and I was present at that protest. Just reading what I could see in the paper, and I'm not sure if that was accurate. I think you're operating under false information, because when I was standing there, I saw a policeman approaching me, and he had a very angry look on his face, and I thought, uh-oh, what have we done? And he walked up to me, and I said, "You're having a bad day, aren't you? I'm sorry." And he said, "Yes, I am. I have been lied to. I've been called here under false pretenses. I was told you were swearing. I was told you were stepping in front of the cars. I was told you were blocking the sidewalk. I hear only foul language coming from some people in cars, the young people who tend to do that anyway." And he saw none of it. He said, "Everyone has a right to be on one side or the other of this, but no one has a right to lie." And I just want you to check to see if your information is correct, because I had an experience 12 years ago in the town near where I lived, in Melbourne, Florida, where I was arrested for praying on the public sidewalk because they had an ordinance very similar to this. And what I did was stop walking, opened my Bible and started to pray. I spent 1 month in jail, 5 months suspended, and then finally we beat that ordinance. But I don't want to go through that again. I just want you to consider what I warned, let's see, in 1998, I was asked to speak in front of the Duma of Russia, and I warned them. I said, be very, very careful, because the Bible says, those who build the city without God build in vain. You're trying to build a beautiful city. Be very, very careful, because a big court battle over this would not help your city.
That's right.
My name is Deanna Waller, and I reside at 2341 El Prado Terrace, Deltona. I oppose this ordinance, and I say this in all humility, and birthed out of a love for my Savior Jesus Christ, and with all due respect, Mayor. This was in response to your heinous comment 2 weeks ago. This was written from the article by Jay Rogers on the Forerunner. If the self-proclaimed pro-life members of the City Commission truly believe that showing posters of aborted babies in a public area is heinous and dirty, it begs the question, which is the more heinous and dirty of the following? Is it heinous that unborn children are being killed and dismembered through Planned Parenthood of Greater Orlando's license to do abortion through the end of the second trimester? Is it heinous that according to the Guttmaker Institute, which is Planned Parenthood's research arm, a significant number of women who have an abortion due to an unwanted pregnancy suffer physical and emotional trauma? Is it heinous that Planned Parenthood of Greater Orlando takes in over $1 million a year in income for surgical
Ma'am,
abortion procedures
I'd like for you
alone?
to speak to the ordinance before us, please, which we can discuss all of those facts at another time, but what's before us is the ordinance, is not what Planned Parenthood is or isn't doing. So if you could
Right,
address
but
the
I'm
ordinance.
addressing the heinous comment that you used, and I felt like it was
That's
unfair
not
and unjust to
part
call
of
us
the
heinous
ordinance.
without the proper information. So I just wanted that to be known
I
for public
appreciate it.
record.
And the heinous part, not that I feel like I need to defend myself, but I think it's inappropriate to call that out at anybody's home.
Okay, again, we are called to expose evil as Christians. You know, that is our duty. We are
And
sworn.
that's not what we're here to debate, because as a Christian, I would be happy to talk about that with you at another time. We have an ordinance before us that we need to stay on point with. So if you would do that, I would appreciate it.
I understand, sir, and I would just like to say that there is no peace and tranquility with child killing, and that is according to God's law, to which all people will ultimately be held accountable.
Thank you. And before others speak again, the activities and the actions that have brought us to this point are material to a point. We're not here to discuss abortion, whether it's good or bad. We're not here to discuss what people do in this community. We're specifically here to discuss an ordinance that we're voting on. So if you can hold your comments to that, I would be very, very appreciative. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Madeline Potts. I live at 1499 Aloma Avenue. On August 18th, I was 24 hours after surgery. I was trying to sleep, and I was awakened by a commotion right outside my house. My husband went outside to see what it was. The commotion continued, and when he didn't come back in, I went outside because I was worried about him. This is what I saw. The street right in front of my house was lined with protesters. The street across the street was lined with protesters. They had huge banners, posters, very graphic posters. They were shouting scripture. They were waving and yelling to cars. They were confronting people on the street, right in their faces, with their viewpoints. My husband appealed to them to quiet down, which they didn't do until there was a police presence. Also, they brought their children with them. They positioned their young children along Aloma Avenue, literally inches from the curb. Aloma Avenue is a busy street, a dangerous street to be walking along, certainly dangerous to be standing along. But it's also a residential street, and it's my street where I've lived for 40 years. I implore you to appreciate how many safe places there are in Winter Park for people to voice their opinions, to exercise their freedom of speech without causing accidents or near accidents, without endangering themselves and their children and the other residents of this community. And I'd like you to imagine how you would feel if you were 24 hours after surgery and this took place in front of your house. How would you feel to have an aggressive stranger confronting your husband or your wife inches from their face, very hostilely? How you would feel to have your child present while someone is calling you names and calling you a murderer? And if you think about these things, I think you'll realize that you have to make this ban permanent. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Jay Rogers. I live at 3083 Bloomsbury Drive in Kissimmee, Florida. And I wanted to thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. Especially I'd like to thank Larry Brown for taking about 15 minutes when he wasn't feeling well at the last meeting to explain the ordinance to me. I started to explain the last time that I spoke about the time, a story about the time where I actually lived in such a buffer zone. And that was in Melbourne, Florida. And what happened was I was a resident of Longwood, Florida, and I read in the newspaper and saw on television that there was going to be a resistance by some Christians who were pro-life in a buffer zone in Melbourne, Florida. And I realized that these people were going to be risking arrest. At the time, one of my jobs was as a writer for a newspaper called The Forerunner. I wanted to go and observe it, write an article about it, and to make a long story short, I ended up being one of the 200 people that were arrested. It was a very profound experience. I sat in a holding cell with about several dozen other men. I think in total there were about 200 people over a period of several months that were arrested. I saw grown men, some of them war veterans, some of them senior citizens, in tears, deeply hurt, because they lived to see the day when you could be arrested for walking on a sidewalk and holding a sign that said "Choose Life." Now I realize that there's different versions of what happened on Loma Ave that day. I asked Larry if he would watch a video that I made of it. That's not going to tell you the whole story because, as I know from being a newspaper person, there's always a perspective. But what I want to tell another story about how, after several months, I ended up buying a house across the street from that abortion clinic. And I lived there for 7 years. And in that 7 years, I saw a lot. I had a roommate at the time. I was single, and his name was Graham Dugas. We had a mailbox that was actually in the buffer zone because it was across the street next to the abortion clinic. We could be arrested for walking across the street. So my roommate one day decided that he would mail a letter while they were doing abortions. He was arrested. He was brought to jail. Several months later, he defended himself in court successfully. And when it came time for the prosecution to arrest, and he basically just said, I moved to dismiss the case. The judge decided there was no evidence that he violated the buffer zone. Later, he sued the city for false arrest, and they settled with him. All the cases that resulted from that buffer zone arrest after that time were also dismissed. And then eventually the police stopped arresting people. I think you have to be careful what you do, because in my experience from having observed this for several years, sometimes, and the mayor alluded to this last week, sometimes, I didn't appreciate being called heinous, by the way, but one thing you said that I thought was great, and I respect you for
And I didn't call you heinous, sir.
our behavior was heinous, excuse me. One thing that you said that I
You
respect,
can conclude your comment.
I will, is that sometimes you think that something is going to bring peace and tranquility to a city. If it's not principled, it can do the exact opposite. And I think that you should just enforce the laws that you have and take a very serious look at what you're doing tonight, because the city of Winter Park is going to be in the spotlight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jennifer Anderson. I've lived here for 20 years. Now I live at 2020 West Fawcett, 3279. My husband, as some of you know, was a commissioner a few years ago. And my daughter now is 22, and she said, "Oh my gosh, Mom, I'm so thankful that we didn't have to come home to somebody being angry, as they were, with some of the votes that their father had to make, or chose to make." She said to me, when she was in middle school, she was bullied. Have any of you been bullied? She's grown into a beautiful young lady now, but she was bullied and buck teeth or whatever. And she said, "Mom, my only safe spot was my house. That's where I was loved, and that's where I felt like I was okay, and you loved me unconditionally." And the topic isn't pro-choice, pro-life, it doesn't matter. The topic is that we need now, unfortunately, what Orlando's had for a long time, which is an ordinance. We haven't had to worry about it. The whole time my husband was commissioner, we never had picketing. But now we have people. I happened to be there that day, and I do want to say I was there as well and got my 15 seconds of fame on your video. And they were yelling, and they were chanting until the police came. And they were saying that this particular person was a baby killer. And no one needs to hear that, especially her 3-year-old son. Our homes are a safe place. And I'd like to also say, for those of you, most of you that were speaking that against the ordinance don't live here, but this commission just named a park, Martin Luther King Jr. Park. And just as an aside, sorry, Mayor, if you want to change the hearts and minds of people, it's through peace and love, not fear and intimidation. Because trust me, you're not going to change people's minds through the threats of lawsuits and other things you've brought to this commission today. I don't think it's effective. I'd think to yourself, what would Martin Luther King do? Thank you very much for listening.
My name is Sally Blackman. I live at 1521 Harris Circle, across the lake from the Tosches. I would like to reiterate what other people have so eloquently said and urge you to vote for this ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is James Walker. I live just north of Tampa, Tonotosassa, Florida. I have for the last 14 years. I lived in Winter Park prior to that for more than 37 years. I'm speaking on behalf of my mother, Jean Walker, 84 years old, lives at 205 Tottery Lane, Winter Park. And on behalf of the other Walker family members who are disabled and living at the same address. The Walker family, first I'd like to start off with the Thomas Jefferson said, "The boisterous sea of liberty is never without a wave." And then I want to speak on behalf of my mother, who's not able to be here, and the rest of the family. The Walker family of Winter Park, Florida fails to see any justification or right that this municipality believes that it could possibly have to permanently ban the essential liberties of the majority of citizens for the sole security of one citizen complainant. Laws are already on the books to deal with disorderly conduct, breach of the peace, obstruction of rights of way, stalking. The proposed ban on the First Amendment sidesteps one important fact, that the rights afforded us under the First Amendment belong to us by the laws of God and nature and are not bestowed to us by other men. I want to point out that for over 14 years I haven't had so much as a parking ticket. I was arrested on October 5th, 2011, while playing my mother's over 100-year-old upright, non-amplified piano to the tune of The Impossible Dream. I spent the night in jail for that. I was acquitted by an Orange County judge. We live in fear of government intrusion not in fear of the public. I also want to point out that Samuel Adams said that if you love wealth greater than liberty, the tranquility of servitude greater than the animating contest of freedom, go home from us in peace. I'm not going to finish the rest of that, but I want to point out the reason I was here visiting my mother was because the next day I had a cardiac appointment. I had to go through a cardiac procedure. I was denied my medication in Orange County that evening and through the following morning, where I was registered to have a heartbeat of 40 per minute. I thank the good Lord I'm here today, but I feel awkward even attempting to play the piano in Winter Park, and nobody should be in fear of government intrusion to that degree.
That's right.
Reverend Brian Fullwider, pastor for 26 years, 13 of them serving here at First Congregational Church, currently serving at Rollins College as a fellow and president of the Interfaith Council of Central Florida. I am here to speak in favor of the ordinance. Mayor, you talked earlier about Buckingham Palace, and I think 730 Park Avenue, where I grew up, not here, but in a little town in California, was maybe 100 square feet smaller than Buckingham Palace. My dad used to say, Pops, who many here know, that, you know, a person's home is sort of their castle. Whether we call it a palace or a castle, it's where we find the last refuge in terms of the hard day we face, the difficulties of life. We find refuge with family and loved ones, and in the security of that place that should be sacred space for us and should have a kind of sanctity to it that speaks about what it means to be part of a community and part of a place that protects the safety of its citizens and the well-being of the citizens. It's not just physical well-being that we talk about, it's emotional, psychological, and spiritual well-being. All of these we want to inculcate and make part of the fabric, and we do it very well in Winter Park, and I want to encourage us to continue to do that. You have legal eagles that will get you through the proper ordinance making, that will be bulletproof in terms of what the Supreme Court has already upheld in 1988. There are plenty of precedents around for protecting individual citizens in this way. And it is a spiritual enterprise, I believe. We continue to face in a world of great destruction and distraction, the kinds of things that separate and destroy people. Two of my colleagues, an Islamic imam and a rabbi with whom I work on a little radio show here in town, we spend time trying to help people build good relationships. But I can tell you, those two colleagues, I know their stories. I know the ways that they have been harassed. And I want everyone, every citizen, protected in their home and have a safe refuge at the end of the day, whether we call it our palace or our castle or just our place to be safe and to be at home. And I encourage the support of this ordinance. Thank you to each of you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Mark Schmitter. I live at 3320 Bay Lane, and I am against this ordinance. First of all, I am a veteran, and I took an oath to defend, to uphold, and endorse the Constitution of the United States, and so did all of you, by the way. One way or another, you have to defend the Constitution first. And this ordinance is a direct contradiction to the Constitution. Yes. I am very well about First Amendment rights. I was arrested by Judge Belton Perry more than a year ago and given 151 days in jail. I'm out on appeal for handing out flyers not in the free speech zone. Yeah, the free speech zone in the country is supposed to be a free speech zone. So I am a veteran. I took an oath to defend it, as I said, but when I was young, I used to carry a gun as a warrior. I am still a warrior, but now I carry the Constitution. And I'm looking at about $10,000 in legal fees, and I might even do it again. But we do have limitations to our First Amendment rights, we're allowed to have the freedom of peaceful assembly, and the limitations are, we cannot infringe on other people's rights. If they're making too much noise, they're disturbing the peace. Arrest them. If they inhibit traffic, they're not allowed to do that. Arrest them. The First Amendment limitations also include incitement. You're not allowed to say fire in a theater. You all know this, especially Mr. Brown, I imagine. And you're not allowed to use fighting words, and you're not allowed to use obscenities. Sure, I heard them described as using obscenities. Arrest them. But you cannot stop them from peaceable assembly. Now, come on, guys, you got to understand what's going on here, especially Mr. Brown, because, if you pass this ordinance, you may as well call it the Lawyer Full Employment Act.
That's right.
Because you're going to have litigation all over the place. It's just going to, the taxpayer's going to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars when you take away the First Amendment rights, because this is not really about the abortion issue or anything else, or the right to life. You may think it is, but it's about the Republic of the United States. That ever since 9/11, everybody's been chipping away at the Constitution, and we're losing our freedom. And I'm a lawyer, and I'm not going to stand for it. And I only carry a Constitution. I won't carry a gun. At least, not right away. Let's see. I'd like to end this, though, by saying that the preservation of freedom requires constant vigilance, and I'm definitely a vigilant person, and the preservation of justice requires constant vigilance, and I beg you to ignore this. It's just going to cost everybody a whole lot of money to defend the Constitution.
Thank you, sir.
James Fisher, 2210 Coldstream Drive, Winter Park, Florida. Just speaking in support of this ordinance. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Cicely Fisher. I'm at Coldstream Drive as well, and I would just like to thank you for allowing us to speak on this and speak in support of this ordinance. And also, as a teacher, I can imagine my students who don't like what's happening in the classroom coming to my house and protesting there. There's a time and a place for what happens, and my doorstep is not that way.
Sounded like impressed.
Walker, I oppose this ordinance. I feel that in the Trayvon Martin case, there wouldn't be an arrest if people aren't given the right to protest. There's a number of news stories where people protest child molesters moving next door, next to schools and stuff. There's also murderers that people go and protest, and to restrict this right is unconstitutional.
That's right.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Barbara Havanetz, and I actually live in Winter Park. I live at 608 Langhold Drive, which is near Aloma and Lakemont, that particular intersection. So that is in my neighborhood. And I do not feel that relinquishing freedom, because freedom doesn't mean you can do anything, anytime, anywhere you want it to be done. Just because you think you're right doesn't mean you can do anything you want to do. And I don't think any one person should be singled out in their individual home to be identified just because of their political beliefs. It doesn't matter what that belief happens to be, because there are so many forums out there in this world. I mean, we have the internet. You can blast your opinions anywhere and everywhere. I don't want you on my doorstep. I don't want you in the public street in front of my house, because there's so many more places you can be. And poor Miss Tosh, she had the misfortune of living on a very busy street that was very public, and an opportunistic person could certainly take advantage of her just because she was physically on that street. That wouldn't make any difference if Ms. Tosh lived in Worthington Circle, where there are 3 houses. I don't think they would have chosen that location. It wasn't her, it was the location. And the location happened to be a very public location, but that was her private home.
as well as other people on Ohlona. It's their private home. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Sabanas, do a yellow card for the good evening. My name is Eric Hawley, and I'm also a Winter Park resident. I live on 220 Brewer Avenue, which some of you may know is also Ohlona Avenue. It's the same street. And I feel that that people should have the privacy and feel safe in their own home. I also believe strongly in free speech, that people should be able to speak their opinion, but again, it should be limited. We are a country of laws and freedom, but not everybody should be able to do everything they want to do. And I think that there are people out there that will twist the law to benefit them, and to twist truth and that sort of thing. So I strongly ask you to support this and go forward with it, and I appreciate your time. Thank you. Thank you.
My name is Michelle Herzog, 5200 Orange Boulevard, Sanford, Florida. I want to thank you. I know that all of you mean well in what you're doing with this ordinance. It's funny, last night I watched a video, the Rosa Parks story. I'm a huge civil rights buff. My hero is Harriet Tubman, if any of you are familiar with Harriet Tubman. She risked running through winter to rescue slaves and bring them to freedom. What we're dealing with right here is a civil rights issue, a free speech issue. I know that maybe the signs were ugly, maybe things that were said, maybe people didn't like, but there was a public sidewalk. And woe unto a nation that takes away the right to free speech. This nation was founded on the blood and sweat of our founding fathers that fought for this right. And I beg and implore you to remember what our founding fathers fought so hard for. When I think about Martin Luther King, you named the park after Martin Luther King. And watching the Rosa Parks story, these people, what they did was considered travesty, but they fought hard for their right to be heard and to have laws changed. And certain people may not like the civil discourse of abortion, but I know that possibly my home could be picketed. But I don't want to take away anybody's right to do that. And I would ask you to think long, hard, and clear, and remember what was fought so hard for here before passing this ordinance and taking away the rights of citizens and allowing your police officers to do the work that they were hired to do. That day there were police officers there. They could have arrested people, but they didn't because there was nothing to arrest them for. So thank you very much.
Hello. Can I have this work for putting things on and see it up there?
I can't. Please identify who you are.
Oh, Kathy Hettinger, 2827 Eastern Parkway in Winter Park. Great, okay. I'm going to kind of be all over the place here. Part of it is because...
Please speak to the ordinance, that's the main...
Yes, I'm actually very much speaking to the ordinance, but I'm going to have to go over far field, so I apologize. First off, I've lived almost my entire adult life right here, and germane to this is I'm from Oklahoma. Another aspect of this is that somehow, if you're Arab, even if you're Baha'i, even if you're Jewish Arab, then suddenly you are under attack in this country right now.
That is a field, if you could speak to the...
No, I am. I'm exactly getting to it. Exactly. I only have 3 minutes. You're going to keep interrupting me? Okay, this is... Look, the elephant in the room may not be me. The elephant in the room is this. These are a group of people that have bombed, that have shot, and yet somehow if you're from a country, you're decided to be a domestic terrorist. I'm from Oklahoma. That's a place where Native people from our country did dastardly stuff that killed people. So what I would say is, don't stop with an ordinance. Go after these people. They kill people. It's about time you got a spine. Maybe a city can't do that. Maybe a federal government has to do it. I am sick and tired of people worried about their life and limb over this. Now, as far as protesting, you show up there in a line, I'll show up there in a line like this right in front of you. If that's your right, that's my right. When you look at this, you can't do this on a city level. You can't do it. You have to be able to have some ability to have an expression of this culture, especially one. Let's look at what happened in the county recently. I mean, this is my town. This only has 20,000 people. We paid $150 for the suckers to go away. Those darn developers. They're now putting up another monstrosity. The people up here, they're not as interested in us, in our residents. Winter Park residents are strong. They're very strong. But they shouldn't go against their own principles of freedom of speech. They should instead use the laws readily available to them. Now, can I do this? Can I walk around with this sign? Probably not. How about this one? Do we all know that, of course, every campaign sign is illegal? What about this? Opt out of FCAT. Every parent can do it. Did you know that? You don't have to. All your third grader can do is flunk. Don't take the test. It's your right. And this is going to be really intense. They saved it for last. I met the guy who 2 weeks after Fukushima, right over here a few blocks away, he was there. He walked in 2 weeks after. They left the kids. The Japanese government left the kids. We're 120 miles from the reactor here and 80 miles from there. This is our government. We need a big government, not a little snooty government that's going to go against our rights. When people's health, wealth, safety is our concern, we need to understand the big picture. We need to go after the elephant in the room. We need to do something about that. And all of us have a concern about this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I was praying in tongues the whole time, and I made
There are
more
other
sense than
citizens
that.
wishing to
I'll
speak
tell you
about
what.
this matter.
Sorry.
Seeing none, I'll close the floor for public comment then. Commissioners, any discussion?
I'd like to move the ordinance
It's
forward.
already been moved, Commissioner, so
Sorry.
unless there's any discussion, officer, we'll take that.
Actually, the only thing that I would like to say is that I had the opportunity to witness the picket this weekend in a public place. And I believe that everyone who participated or was involved in that knows that in Winter Park, you were given the opportunity to picket in a public place very peacefully. And that's what Winter Park is about. I do feel that we owe to our residents the tranquility of their homes. And we owe to you the opportunity to state your opinions and picket in a public area. And I think we are doing our best to do both of those things.
I also got a chance to experience that on the inside, being inside the church during that time, and I didn't like it a bit, okay? So there is another side to it. I understand that's freedom. I understand all of that, but it's not a pleasant place to be. It's not a pleasant place to be, but that was exactly what happened. It was kind of interesting how unifying something like that was in our church and in our community. So there's no easy answer. Everybody's entitled to their own issues and own deals, but it's still not always all that fortunate for everybody who happens to be involved close by.
I would just say that some question the applicability of this ordinance as it relates to the First Amendment, and I appreciate that perspective. There are others that are trying to use the First Amendment to shield hatred, harassment, and intimidation. And I think that's fairly transparent. It's clear from the recitals at the front of this ordinance that there's significant case law that's tested up and through the United States Supreme Court that allow for this type of ordinance. So for me, the constitutionality of this ordinance is defensible. As every attorney that I deal with in my professional life says to me, when I ask them, are we covered here? they will say, anybody can sue you for anything. So for those that threaten, sure, I mean, you can, and we'll see. From my perspective, one of the most important responsibilities of every elected government official is to ensure the safety of their constituency. It's sad that we're forced to enact such an ordinance. If it wasn't today, it would probably be sometime in the near future for some other reason. Regardless of the profession of the targeted person, this most crude form of harassment doesn't belong in our community. Also assuring is that nearby municipalities, and municipalities across the country, have similar ordinances. So that certainly is an assuring support for this, for us. This in no way restricts a group or an individual's right to free speech in our city. It simply allows us to direct those wishing to intimidate and harass people away from residents and into more appropriate areas. Just say again, I'm disappointed we have to do this, regardless of the profession of the person that you want to picket or protest. There are appropriate areas, there are appropriate places, and we certainly allow that. So I'll be supporting this ordinance.
I'll also be supporting this ordinance. I had the opportunity to go between commission meetings last weekend. I went home, and home for me is in Sylvania, Ohio. And just that the word home resonates with you. And to go and sit in the chair you sat in when you were yay so high, there is that real sense of security. And before we were a place to live, work, and play, before we were a city of culture and heritage, Winter Park is a city of homes. And it used to be said when you could see the smoke from your neighbor's chimney, it was time to move. Well, we don't have those options anymore. We have to live together, and we have certain rules, and we have certain civilities that we need to exhibit because we do have to live together. And one of those is, in my mind, the sanctity of the home. It is the one place you can go to get away from everything. And we are a city of homes. If I have sworn to uphold the Constitution, but I've also looked every one of my neighbors in the eyes and said, I'm going to do what's in the best interest of Winter Park. And to be quite honest, if that was constitutional or not constitutional, I would still do it. Because these are my neighbors, and they deserve the protection from any kind of intrusion